There's a particular sting in being manipulated, not because it's loud, but because it's subtle. It's the silent pull on your emotions, the slight twist of your logic, the quiet exploitation of your need to be liked, respected, or loved. Manipulation is not always malicious in its appearance. It often hides in the tone of a concerned friend, the language of a guilt-tripping parent, or the passive disappointment of someone who wants to control your choices without saying so. It's gaslighting masked as concern. It's coercion disguised as closeness. It's when someone makes you question your own perception so they can rewrite your reality. But here's what Stoic philosophy teaches us from the start. Manipulation only works if you hand over the keys to your mind. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, no one can harm you without your consent. To the untrained mind, manipulation is an attack. To the Stoic, it is a mirror, showing you the exact place where you're not yet sovereign. Let's strip manipulation of its mystique and look at it through a Stoic lens. What is it, really? Manipulation is emotional influence with hidden intent. It is persuasion not for your benefit, but for the benefit of the manipulator. Whether it's a partner who makes you feel guilty for setting boundaries, a colleague who subtly questions your capabilities to make you second-guess yourself, or a friend who makes withdrawal seem like punishment if you don't comply, the game is always the same: control. But control only works if you give them access. And this is where Stoicism reclaims the battlefield, not on the outside, but within. The Stoics knew something we often forget in our modern age of overstimulation and emotional reactivity. No one can drag you into a reaction unless you are already halfway leaning into it. They believed that the root of our suffering is not the behavior of others, but our interpretation of it. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." What he meant was simple. You suffer because you believe their manipulation says something about your value. But the Stoic doesn't play that game. The true Stoic doesn't react to manipulation because they've already done the work of self-examination. They've already untied the knots of emotional need. They've already made peace with the idea that being misunderstood does not equal being wrong. That not pleasing someone doesn't mean you've failed. They've withdrawn from the addiction of needing to be validated by external forces, and so, when manipulation arrives, it's like wind trying to move a mountain. And here's the most powerful Stoic refrain: manipulation is not a betrayal of your worth. It's an invitation to clarify your boundaries. It's not a signal that you are weak, but that you are still growing. That somewhere inside, you crave control, acceptance, or harmony so deeply that someone else can weaponize it. Now, let's look at the psychology of why manipulators succeed. It's because they don't appeal to your logic. They appeal to your emotions, your guilt, your fear of abandonment, your hope for approval. They pull strings you didn't know were exposed. They speak in tones that bypass reason and go straight into your emotional core. The Stoic, however, trains to identify these strings before others can pull them. Through daily reflection, stillness, journaling, and emotional inventory, the Stoic learns to ask, is this in my control? Is this reaction necessary? Is this worth my peace? Marcus Aurelius reminds us, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. That's not just a quote, it's a strategy. It means that when someone tries to twist your truth, you stay still. When someone gaslights you, you return to your reality with clarity. When someone guilt trips you, you recognize the emotion, but you don't let it lead you. Imagine how much power you reclaim when you no longer feel the need to explain your boundaries. When you no longer respond out of pressure. When you no longer entertain guilt that wasn't earned. That is what Stoicism offers. Not just a way to think, but a way to live unmanipulated. So here's the hard truth. You will never control how others behave. Some people will continue to manipulate, whether out of habit, trauma, or malice. But Stoicism doesn't ask you to fix them. It asks you to master yourself. It teaches you to see manipulation not as a crisis, but as a compass. A test, an indicator of where you still need to guard your peace. You don't fight manipulation with anger. You meet it with stillness. You don't counter it with explanation. You disarm it with silence. And most importantly, you don't internalize it as your fault. You recognize it as their strategy, and you stay rooted in your truth. That's the Stoic response. Not loud, not dramatic, but immovable. Now the question becomes, once you see manipulation for what it is, how do you respond to it in real time without giving away your energy or control? That's what we'll explore next. The moment someone attempts to manipulate you, your first instinct might be to push back, explain yourself, or even get emotionally entangled in their tactics. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. When manipulation appears, the first rule is simple. Don't react, observe. This isn't a passive stance. It's a strategic one. It's the difference between being pulled into their game or standing apart from it like an unmoved witness. A Stoic sees manipulation not as a personal offense, but as data. They study the manipulator's behavior, patterns, and objectives, without judgment, without haste, without flinching. Lesson number 1. Observe their behavior, not their words. Manipulators often rely on sweet language, carefully crafted emotional appeals, and persuasive reasoning designed to confuse you. They use guilt, fear, or obligation to control your choices. But words are just noise. What matters is the pattern behind the words. What do they repeatedly do? How do they react when you set a boundary? Do they respect silence, or do they fill it with urgency and pressure? The Stoic doesn't chase words. They track behavior. Lesson number 2. Do not respond from injury. Respond from clarity. This is critical. Most people react when their pride is hurt, when their sense of fairness is violated, or when they feel emotionally cornered. That's exactly what manipulators count on. But a Stoic pauses. They create space between stimulus and response. They breathe. They wait. In that space, they ask, what is true here? What do I know for sure? And what emotion is being triggered? Instead of impulsive retaliation, they offer measured response, or no response at all. Because sometimes, silence is the clearest reply. Let's examine some real-world scenarios. Suppose you're dealing with a romantic partner who consistently uses guilt to control your time. They say things like, if you really loved me, you'd stay. Every time you set a boundary or ask for space, a non-Stoic might feel compelled to defend their love, over-explain, or give in out of emotional exhaustion. But the Stoic observes. They see the guilt tactic, not the words. They identify the emotional hook, and they refuse to bite. They reply with calm truth. I care deeply, and I'm still leaving to take care of what I need. And they walk away, not to punish, but to remain whole. Or take the case of family manipulation. Maybe a parent constantly reminds you of all the sacrifices they've made, subtly implying that you owe them your life decisions in return. You're torn between loyalty and autonomy. A reactive response might be angry rebellion, or silent compliance. But the Stoic, again, pauses. They journal the moment. They write, what is in my control? Answer, my choices. What emotion is being provoked? Answer, guilt and fear of disapproval. Does that emotion deserve to govern me? No. And then, with clarity, the Stoic acts, rooted in reason, not resentment. In the workplace, manipulation may come in more professional clothing. A colleague might compliment you before assigning you extra tasks, disguising obligation as praise, or a superior might use veiled threats. Only team players move up here, to pressure agreement. But the Stoic has trained their eyes. They see the tactic beneath the tone. They understand the emotional leverage being applied and resist reacting to it. Instead, they assess, is this aligned with my role? Does this violate my values? If yes, they set a firm boundary, quietly and directly, without apology. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if you are pained by anything external, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment about it. This quote is a compass when facing manipulation. It means that even the most toxic behavior loses its grip when you stop assigning it power. The Stoic rewrites the script. They don't ask, "Why are they doing this to me?" They ask, "What story am I telling myself about this?" Then they erase that story and replace it with a more powerful one. Their tactics reveal them. Not me. So what happens when you stop reacting to manipulation? What changes? Everything. First, the manipulator loses their grip. They're fishing for a specific emotion: guilt, shame, fear. If you don't give it to them, their script fails. Second, you reclaim your clarity. The more you observe without reacting, the clearer the situation becomes. You see patterns, you gather insight, and most importantly, you stay in control. Finally, your silence becomes a boundary. You don't have to fight them to win. You just have to stop playing their game. The path of a Stoic is not marked by sharp words or dramatic exits. It's marked by calm observation, intentional stillness, and disciplined response. You don't need to raise your voice to be powerful. You don't need to expose their manipulation to feel justified. You need only to see clearly, act cleanly, and remain unshaken. And the irony is, when you do that, manipulators usually walk away. Not because you forced them out, but because their tactics have no effect on someone who sees too clearly to be fooled. You become untouchable, not because you're cold or distant, but because you've mastered the art of emotional self-defense. You don't react, because you don't need to. You don't chase, because you don't lack. You simply observe, and in your observation, you reclaim your peace. There comes a moment when silence becomes louder than speech. In Stoicism, that moment is not weakness, it's resistance. It's when you choose not to answer manipulation, not to dignify emotional chaos with engagement. That is lesson number 3. Silence is resistance. Not the silence of fear or avoidance, but the silence of sovereignty. It's a refusal to fuel drama with your energy. When you go silent in the face of guilt tripping, emotional blackmail, or passive aggression, what you're really doing is setting a line that doesn't need to be announced. You're telling the world, my emotions are not your playground. Emotional boundaries are the invisible lines that define where others end and you begin. And yet, many people never draw them clearly. They leak emotions. They absorb projections. They internalize blame. They believe they owe explanations, comfort, or access to anyone who demands it, especially those closest to them. But Stoicism reminds us of lesson number 4. You owe no emotional access to those who twist it. Emotional access is a privilege, not a right. Just because someone is upset doesn't mean you're responsible. Just because someone feels something doesn't mean you must fix it. And just because someone demands closeness doesn't mean they deserve it. In his teaching on the discipline of assent, Epictetus explains that the Stoic's first duty is not to the world but to perception. When an impression arrives, whether it's someone's anger, guilt, or flattery, the Stoic pauses. They do not immediately assent or agree to the emotional weight of that moment. Instead, they ask, is this under my control? Is this worth my energy? Is this true, or merely noise? This pause is the space where emotional power is reclaimed. It's not the external event that breaks you. It's the permission you give it. Stoics revoke that permission. Let's make this real. Imagine someone close to you uses emotional blackmail. They say things like, after all I've done for you, this is how you repay me. The intention isn't clarity, it's guilt. It's control disguised as hurt. The non-Stoic response might be to over-explain, apologize, or comply just to keep peace. But a Stoic breathes, literally. They draw in air. They anchor to their body. They allow the moment to unfold without being pulled under. Then, maybe hours later, maybe never, they reply with truth, not emotion. I hear your frustration, but I stand by my choice. No defense, no debate, just grounded clarity. Or take the scenario of passive aggression. A coworker makes a veiled jab in a meeting. Some of us actually deliver on time. They say with a fake smile, eyes on you. The old reaction might be to snap back or let it ruin your day. The Stoic reaction? Observe. Register the intention. but don't hand over your peace. You remind yourself. Their behavior is not your responsibility. Their words are not your reality. You journal the interaction later. You may choose to confront it calmly, or you may let it pass. Either way, your boundary is the same. I will not be emotionally hijacked. One of the most powerful practices to maintain emotional boundaries is delayed response. You don't need to answer right away. You don't need to reply to every text, justify every feeling, or soothe every discomfort. That time gap is your fortress. In it, you regain control. You ask, what part of this is emotional bait? What would I do if I didn't feel guilty? You breathe again, and only when you're centered, you speak, or not. Reflective journaling is another cornerstone tool. It's the post-battle analysis. You ask yourself, did I hold my boundary today? Where did I leak energy? What did I say yes to that violated my peace? You don't judge, you learn. You refine. And each time, the boundary becomes clearer, not to others, but to yourself. Because ultimately, you don't draw boundaries to control others. You draw them to protect your power. Epictetus once wrote, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Manipulation only works when you care more about approval than autonomy. Guilt only works when you value others' comfort over your inner truth. But when you stop explaining your boundaries, stop apologizing for your limits, and start honoring your energy, you become free. Truly free. Not because others respect you, but because you've stopped outsourcing your emotional balance to them. And that is the paradox of Stoic strength. You don't need to confront to be firm. You don't need to attack to be invincible. You don't need to explain to be understood. Your emotional boundaries are not announcements. They are behavior. They are breath. They are the spaces you do not fill with noise, and the doors you do not reopen just to prove you're kind. Manipulators don't know what to do with emotional boundaries. They expect a response. They expect your need to be liked, to explain, to engage. When you offer none of those, you strip them of their tools. You become a mirror they can't bend, a wall they can't scale, and slowly, they fall away, not because you fought them, but because your peace became inhospitable to their chaos. So the next time someone guilt trips you, gaslights you, or tries to pull strings they think are still attached, pause. Breathe. Feel your own center. And remember, you don't owe access. You don't owe reaction. You owe only your truth, your breath, and your quiet return to peace. There is a power in departure that few understand. It is not in the words spoken, the explanations given, or the goodbyes performed. It is in the silence, the absence, the stillness left behind. That is the Stoic exit, unannounced, unapologetic, unshaken. Lesson number 5 is simple. Exit without explanation. Leave them with their confusion. When you walk away from manipulation, from toxic patterns, from dynamics that twist your peace, you do not owe anyone a trail of justification. You do not owe them your voice. You owe yourself your alignment. The Stoic does not perform the exit. He becomes the exit. He does not write long paragraphs to defend his boundaries. He simply stops showing up where his presence is not honored. He does not wage war against the toxic. He simply stops feeding it. And this quiet withdrawal, disorients those who thrive on control. Because they expect noise, they expect an argument, a final confrontation, a dramatic ending. But Stoics offer none of that. They leave behind no fire, no fight, only absence. And in that absence, truth echoes louder than any defense could. Imagine ending a toxic friendship. You've tried to communicate, you've extended patience, practiced empathy, explained your hurt, but the dynamic remains unbalanced. They invalidate, manipulate, demand more than they give. The old you might have written a long message explaining why you're stepping back. But the Stoic you simply step. You stop answering every call. You stop overextending. You stop justifying. And when they ask why, you don't explain, you embody. You say, without words, I am no longer available for my own mistreatment. Or picture leaving a controlling relationship. The kind where love is traded for obedience. Where affection is earned by surrendering your identity. The urge to argue, to make them see what they've done. To get closure, it burns. But the Stoic knows. Seeking closure from those who injured you is asking the wound to heal itself. Instead, you walk. Maybe you move homes. Maybe you change numbers. Maybe you disappear from their emotional orbit entirely. You do not need them to understand. You need to be aligned. That is your mantra. I do not need to be understood. I need to be aligned. Exiting without drama is not avoidance. It is a deliberate act of self-respect. It is saying, I no longer seek validation from the place that wounded me. And in doing so, you take your power back, not by fighting, but by removing your energy. That is the power manipulators fear the most, not your words, but your absence. Let's bring this into the professional world. Imagine working in a manipulation-heavy job. Your value is questioned, your efforts exploited, your emotional energy drained. You've brought up issues, suggested improvements, even stayed late hoping to earn respect. But nothing changes. So one day, instead of waiting for the perfect time or the right conversation, you begin to detach. You set a departure date. You don't tell them until necessary. And when you leave, you do so with no bitterness, no passive aggression, no emotional pleas. You send your resignation. You collect your peace. And you walk, quietly, powerfully, unshakably. Practicing this kind of exit takes training. One effective method is the daily boundary check-in. Ask yourself each morning, where am I betraying my peace to please someone else? What energy drains are disguised as obligations? Write it down. Watch your patterns. Then, commit to one silent withdrawal each week, a person, a habit, a space that no longer reflects your worth. You don't need to make an announcement. You just need to return to yourself. Another practice is the detachment walk. Once a week, take a long walk in silence. No music, no conversation, just your breath and your clarity. Use this time to ask, what am I gripping that is gripping me back? Let go of one thing on that walk. A grudge, a hope, a toxic need for someone to finally value you. Drop it. With each step, imagine walking further into your power, and further away from their hold. And when the world tries to make you feel cold for walking away, remember this. Leaving doesn't make you heartless. Staying where you're being diminished, that's the real harm. As Marcus Aurelius said, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. You don't leave to punish them. You leave to protect you. You don't exit to teach them a lesson. You exit to practice your own. Stoic departure is not about others. It is about alignment. When you begin to leave quietly, consistently, and without fanfare, you begin to realize how much of your power was tied to needing people to understand you. And when that need dies, your peace is born. No applause, no chaos, just freedom. The truth is, some people will never get the closure they expect from you. They will never hear the explanation. They will never understand your silence. And that is okay, because closure is not owed. Alignment is earned. Your new life begins the moment you stop trying to explain the old one to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You're not obligated to stay in spaces that confuse love with control, support with surveillance, attention with manipulation. You don't need to argue your right to peace. You don't need to explain your boundaries. You don't need to justify your departure. You just need to leave. And when you do, without drama, without noise, without performance, you become untouchable. Because the most powerful exit is not the loud one. It is the one that leaves behind no chaos, only silence. The kind of silence that says, I've returned to myself, and I'm not looking back. And from that silence, you rebuild. Which brings us to the next phase. Once you've walked away, how do you restore peace so deep it can't be manipulated again? Victory doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes, it shows up in silence, in the quiet way you no longer flinch, no longer chase, no longer explain. You don't yell. You don't fight to be understood. You've evolved beyond that. This is the final Stoic transformation. From the reactive victim of manipulation to the calm, centered master of your own energy. The one who wins not by conquering others, but by no longer needing the conquest. Lesson number 6. Win by not needing the win. What if true strength isn't found in proving a point, getting closure, or finally being seen by those who ignored you? What if the real triumph is walking away with your peace intact and your dignity untouched? The Stoic understands that to engage in someone else's game is to already be playing by their rules. When someone tries to manipulate you, they crave reaction. But when you respond with nothing but silence and stillness, they lose control, because the game never started. You don't need to win an argument when your presence no longer seeks the stage. You don't need to expose their behavior when your energy no longer feeds it. You don't need to show how wrong they were when you've stopped carrying the need to be right. You win when your peace becomes unshakable. You win when their chaos no longer invites your commentary. You win by not needing the win. Lesson number 7. Manipulation fails where self-mastery begins. The moment you understand your emotions, control your impulses, and stop outsourcing your worth, you become immune to the tactics manipulators use. They can guilt-trip you, but it won't land. They can withhold validation, but you no longer crave it. They can spin stories, gaslight, provoke, but it all hits a wall of stillness. Self-mastery is the shield. It is the boundary that needs no words, the defense that makes no noise. This is your final Stoic arc. You began in confusion, manipulated by guilt, torn by pressure. Then came clarity. You saw their tactics for what they were. You stepped back. You built boundaries. You detached. You walked. And now, you're not just away from them. You're free from them. They can no longer reach the place within you that once bled to be understood. That part is gone, replaced by a quiet, immovable presence. Let Epictetus guide the closing thought. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Let them wonder why they can't shake you. Let them feel your silence as the final word. You don't owe rebuttals. You owe yourself alignment. And now, the final mantra. Say nothing. Pull back. Rebuild. And let your stillness break their control. This is the Stoic's final move. Not confrontation. Not revenge, but transcendence. No one can manipulate the one who governs their own soul. And that is your quiet victory.